Good day, Instagram. My name is Chris Bear. I'm producer of Unstuck, an OCD Kids movie. We're going to do something called Unstuck Kids Speak Out, or at least try it over here on Instagram. We're having some troubles over on Facebook, so we'll see if we can do it this way. It looks like Jake. I
Questions
can add
for
you.
Jake when he's able to join. That would be fantastic. We try to do this Kids Speak Out every month on Facebook to kind of spread the word and give people a chance to talk to somebody with OCD. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. JMU, lots of nines. Yes, reassurance seeking is a big issue in our house. Jake, I heard you for a second.
Yeah. Now,
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Awesome.
Okay, good.
Awesome. So let me just answer this question. Yes, reassurance seeking. My daughter still kind of deals with this, and one of the ways that we have kind of navigated it and work around it is that there's like a certain number of questions that she's allowed to ask, or she'll say something, and if she asks again, we'll say maybe or maybe not. So we won't answer in an affirmative way, and sometimes we will basically just not answer at all and say you've already asked that, and if you don't remember it, that's too bad. So it may sound cruel, but that's one way. The reassurance seeking is clearly the OCD asking for something, and it just doesn't stop over and over. So we have to figure out ways to shortcut it. So hey, Jake, how are you?
Good.
Awesome. I'm glad this finally worked. So let's talk for a second about, we interviewed you a couple years ago, and wondering if you might want to remember back to when OCD was really all, in your life really badly, and what was like some of the first things you realized when something was wrong, or maybe your parents realized that, this is not, I don't like how I feel, or I have these weird feelings.
Yeah, at first when my OCD was at its worst, like I didn't know what anything, like when the symptoms first started showing up, I really had no clue what it was. So I would start getting like intrusive thoughts, and I'd start doing compulsions, and I had no clue what they were, so I kind of kept it to myself, and it just kind of manifested for a while and got worse. And then I finally told, the first person I told was my sister, and I told her not to tell anyone. And then she told my parents, and then I finally started getting the help that I needed for it.
What do you remember, like what the first, or like what are the early things that you were concerned about, or even compulsions were?
One of the first things I had was like evening out when I touched something, so I would have to touch something with both hands. And one of my like first obsessions was, most of my things like involved like something bad happening to my family.
So like, so was evening out related to that? Like you felt like if you touched, both legs at the same time, that mom would be safe on her day to work or something like that? And then I know that it affected you in school. So, when you were first dealing with this and you were telling your sister, was it during the school year? Was it during the summer? Did it come on like suddenly, or?
It mainly started happening during the like the beginning of the school year, because that was the time where it was like most stressful. So it did start happening a little bit over the summer, but then just like it became like exacerbated when I was in school, and it was really tough just to try and like do anything, because that year it was the first year I started at my new school, and I was under so much stress, and I was trying to just like function, and it was just getting harder and harder.
Oh yeah. And then you're dealing with the pressures of your friends and homework and school. So we have a question here about how did you deal with some of the thoughts about bad things happening? Here's what I would say. The first question I want to do is, how did you handle it when OCD was bad? Like, what were some of the compulsions related to, the things that you did to make you think you were protecting your family?
Some of the compulsions, like my biggest thing involved, like I had a ritual with time, where every time I would look at a clock, I would have to do something where I would say the date, and I would do something with my hands, like it mentions in the movie. And so I also had, like, I could only wear certain clothes and stuff, and just a lot of them didn't really make a lot of sense, but I had to do a ton of things like that over and over. So it like took up a lot of my day. And oh,
And now, you know, after kind of you went through some therapy, if that thought comes in your head again, like, oh my God, I got to do something to protect my sister or my mom or something, how do you stop that feeling?
well, the thing, like, the intrusive thoughts never really stop. They're always kind of still there. So you have to recognize that it's an intrusive thought and it's not really the truth, and and if it gets really bad and you do give in, you have to do an exposure for it and just kind of combat it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something important that you have to understand about therapy, is that just because that you like have gone through therapy, maybe you've overcome some of your issues, or you know, you know how to do exposure therapy, it still doesn't mean OCD isn't still in your life. The whole part of therapy is to learn how to recognize it and then understand and fight it. So if you do trip up, or you do have a thought, or you do start doing compulsions, you go, oh, wait a minute. You know, therapy says I got to turn this light on and do something the opposite, and fight it. Thank you for your question, JMU. I really appreciate it. I know you, your family, you know, let's say before you started to go to therapy, were there things that your family did to try to help you out or teach you about it? Or like, where did the term obsessive compulsive disorder come into your life? Do you remember that?
It really came in like right when it was at its worst, right before I started going to therapy. Like, my parents really didn't know much about it either, but they suspected that it was OCD. So they thought, and I started going to therapy, and they confirmed that it was OCD. So that's really when it started becoming a thing in my life. And then we all like researching it, like figuring out what it was and what we could do. And like, it took a couple therapists to finally find the right one.
Yeah, I know you know, people do go through that issue where they you know, they might go to the local person or somebody who treats family issues, and it's just the wrong, you know, or they try to like talk therapy. What were some of the things that the original therapists were trying to get you to do?
The first one that I went to, they didn't do the exposure response prevention therapy. They said they were like against it. So basically what they were having me do was like distracting myself from the OCD in a way, like giving me like a stress ball or something like that. So it was just kind of like, oh, like the OCD is still there, but we're going to distract you from it. So it's not, and that was awful. And then,
so then in addition to, you know, you having to do, you know, looking at clocks and watch, suddenly you have to incorporate some kind of stress ball into the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate. And then you were able to kind of find a therapy group in Manhattan. And what were the things, you know, I know, here's what I actually would love to do before we get into kind of talking about how you were able to kind of do some exposure therapy. I love how some of the stuff didn't make it into the film, but I love how you were able to kind of talk about each piece of OCD. So for the benefit of the viewers, I would love, like, what's your definition of an obsession?
Well, an obsession is the thought in your mind that is like the root of the compulsion. So it's like the intrusive thought behind what you have to do. So usually, like, all of mine, or like the majority of mine, they were all like, I was obsessing over like something bad happening to my family. So it would be like, if you don't do this, you're gonna like get in a car accident and stuff like that. So it's just really, the obsession is just the thought behind whatever the compulsion is that causes you to do the compulsion.
And then how would you describe compulsions?
Compulsions are how you act out. Like with the obsession, it's like the way, it's like sort of like a coping mechanism. Like, if you do this, it'll make me feel better and keep that from happening. So like mine, like touching and evening out with my hands, it makes you feel better for a little bit, but then eventually it just becomes too much, and OCD itself is becoming like the burden. Yeah. Instead of like being a way to help like calm down your thoughts and like make the obsession feel like better.
Yeah, I think the intent of the compulsion is to find that relief of the anxiety, but the relief over time doesn't have that same effect that it might have the first time. So you might add more on top of it. I mean, did you find that, the initial compulsion, more and more things had to be added onto it?
Yeah, definitely. It would start off like a little thing, like a one-time thing, like, oh, just to feel better, let me tap this. And then it's, oh no, now every time you walk into that room, you have to tap it once. And then eventually you're doing like a whole thing before you can walk into every room in your house. And like, it just keeps getting worse and worse and more and more.
And it just took up, so how much part of your day do you think was taking up with OCD thoughts when things were really bad?
Like every minute, every time I had to like, all throughout the school day, I was doing something. When I would get home, it would take me hours just to like finish all the rituals I had to do, like walking into my house before I can actually just like sit down. It was like every minute of the day.
Yeah, and then so we you kind of, if you're watching this, you get an idea of how much time and energy that Jake or somebody with OCD is really spending on dealing with their issues or their worries or concerns. And then, on the other end, you just described an obsession and a compulsion. How would you describe the therapy that you learned to kind of deal with OCD?
The exposure response prevention therapy is, instead of like jumping right into like your most difficult problem with OCD, you face it little by little. So you start, like, you make an exposure hierarchy, which is you list all of your OCD and then rate it from 0 to 10 how difficult it would be for you to not do the compulsion. And then you start with your easiest ones, like the zeros, ones, and twos, and you work up all the way until you're able to do all of the and you're able to do all of the exposures on the list. And so you just work on it little by little until it decreases.
Do you remember what some of your, the easy words were? The easy exposures were?
Yeah, it would be like some things, some of the easier ones would probably be like, if I had to tap something 5 times, I would like, actually no, one, or I would have to use, like, when I was in the shower, I would have to use certain like shampoos and everything, and I would have to use all of them while I was in there. So what I would do is I would like use half of them, and then I would step out of the shower and I would go in and then use the other half, and then eventually, like, once I was overdoing that, then I would use all of them except for one of them, and then so like little by little you'd work down on it until it's easy.
Yeah, and were you doing that, sometimes you have multiple issues that you're dealing with. Were you trying to tackle a lot of things at once, or was the idea that you tackle one issue at a time, or how did you handle it?
I was doing like a lot of it at once. I do like the easier ones for like a lot of issues at one time, and then I'd work up on all of them and like differently.
And by the time you started getting to the therapy, were you tired of dealing with your obsessions and compulsions, so you kind of were motivated, or were you kind of had to be convinced to do it?
I really, like, this isn't the same for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people like try to resist help and it's hard for them, but I really, like, I wanted to get better. So I was, as much as it like hurt me to do everything, like all the exposures and everything, I kept like, I just wanted to get better. I wanted the relief of not having OCD. So I like fought through it.
Yeah, I think that's certainly helpful if your brain and you're just saying enough's enough. Folks, if you want to ask a question, feel free to jump in a comment. This is Jake's got a wealth of knowledge in his head, and happy to share it. I'll keep asking questions, but if you want to have a question about how he handled it, either that might pertain to your issue and or somebody that feel free. So one of the things that you were talking about, and I remember you talking about in the film, was being worried. You went to group therapy. And I know that, I'm sure on the first day they didn't say, okay, guess what, you guys are going to do hierarchies. How was it, the idea of obsessive compulsive disorder introduced to you? How was, and did the therapist you have explain what was going to happen, rather than just jump you in, or how was it kind of the early stages of therapy handled?
Yeah, for sure. Like in the beginning of the first session of it was just all explaining what OCD is, and the way she explained it was that OCD, she had us like express OCD as like a separate like person from us, almost like it's not our brain, like it's like something else in our head, like to separate it from ourselves. And so she had us like give our OCD a name and everything that we would like call it to like just separate it from us, so we know that OCD isn't us. And it was also like she put like it was like an entire schedule, so we knew exactly what we were doing like every single week. And she just made it like extremely clear what we would be doing and what OCD was and how we were going to be combating it.
So it almost became like a class, that you had to go to.
Yeah.
And then, once you were able to start understanding exposure therapy, do you feel it got easier once you had kind of some victories under your belt, or started getting rid of some of the things that were bothering you?
Yeah, for sure. Like the beginning stages of the therapy was definitely the hardest for me, because like everything is there, and then it's like, what do I start with? And like, how do I, like, I've been used to doing this for so long. Like, what is it going to be like when I don't have to do this? And then once you start working on like the bulk of it, then it's just kind of like, you're like, all right, I want to do this. And like, you know how much better it makes you feel once you start to get rid of your OCD, and you just keep working on it, and it gets much easier.
Yeah. So it was a good kind of steamroll. And then, for the benefit of the folks in the audience, one thing we don't talk about is in the film is that you actually became a mentor and like a student teacher, if you will, to other groups. What was that like, and how did kind of your role shift from being somebody, who is practicing exposure as part of the class to being, somebody who kids would ask for advice?
It was really different, like being in the class, not as someone participating in it, but like someone like helping out other people. But it was really great to be able to be a mentor for them, like considering like it's really helpful when you have OCD to meet someone who also has OCD, because it's hard to listen to like even someone who's an expert in it and doesn't have it. You're like, well, you don't know what's going on, you don't actually have it. But like knowing someone who's like been through like I know it would have been helpful, like if I had like when I did it, someone to talk to who like went through the same program as me and has OCD and benefited from it.
Did you find that like before you had gone to that group therapy, were you aware that kids could get OCD, or did you think I'm the only one in the world that has this?
Yeah, I thought, like, I had heard of OCD before, but I had never really, like, when I, like, first started going through everything, I thought, like, I'm the only one who could possibly be going through this, and, like, the only things I had heard about OCD up until that point was, like, oh, like, they wash their hands a lot, and they like their stuff neat, but I just thought, like, I'm the only person who has this, and, like, no one's gonna know what's going on, and they're never gonna be able to help me.
It's a big part of motivation for us to make the film was to, and we found in our personal experience, and I think Vanessa was benefited by just knowing other kids with OCD. There's a bit of community that it instantly builds, because you do feel alone, and when you know somebody's going through something similar, even if it's not the same issue, it's like, oh, wait a minute, there are others like me, and okay, we can maybe deal with this together. I'm curious to know how you're dealing with things now, and what's been going on in your life. I know that you got some jobs, you're working in the world, so how's life, and then how does OCD possibly impact you now?
Yeah, now, like, a little while ago, I did have, like, a little bit of, like, a relapse with my OCD, but it wasn't terrible, but, like, now I know the tools to deal with it. So, like, OCD is very minor now. It's still there, obviously. It never really completely goes away, but it's manageable now. And, I'm, like, I'm functioning fine. I have a job, and, like, obviously go to school and everything. And yeah.
That's great. And are you guys still planning to come to DC?
I think so, yeah.
Awesome. So that's a great kind of place to end it up a little bit, to let everybody know that Jake's going to be down at the OCD conference, along with Vanessa and Charlotte from the film, and Kelly and myself will be there, and Allie, the other assistant producer. So, you know, if there's anybody that's watching this on the replay, you'll be able to, and you're going to the conference, feel free to stop by, say hi, ask us questions while we're down there. I'm definitely going to be doing some live streams at the conference. So I'm sure you're going to see Jake again on live streams, even though you don't have to hang out all day at the booth, but you know, that'll be a place to meet Jake, and also talk to his family and get an idea of you know, and talk to him in person, which always helps. Is there any piece of advice that you would want to give somebody that's either dealing with this now or just found out they have OCD?
Just definitely, like, if there's someone there who wants to help you, accept their help, because it's easy to push everyone away and try and deal with it yourself. But it's really good to have like that support and that extra layer of help just to like help you get through it. Someone who empathizes with you and knows what you're going through. It's just good to like go through it with people instead of trying to combat it on your own.
Yeah, that's you actually just made me think about you know, you were getting educated about OCD, but so were your parents. Were there things that they were learning and reading too? You know, they had to get schooled on it, so you were almost learning together or practicing together.
The program that we went through, there was a book that they had to read about OCD. So every night, like, I'd go home with like my exposure homework, and then they'd have to read like a ton of pages in the book. And then there were in the same program, there were parent sessions where the parents would go in and then they would get educated on OC. So like while I was going through it, they were going through it with me because they were learning everything they needed to know about it to help me get through it.
Like you were both going to class.
Mm-hmm.
I had different types of homework.
Yeah.
That's really great. And last question I'm going to have is, were there any books or resources that you found online that, you know, you found was helpful that you would recommend to people, whether it was something you read or a video or a person that inspired you or something like that?
Well, obviously the movie, very helpful, but what I'm not sure what it was called. I think it was called like Talking Back to OCD, the book that they had us use in the program. That was extremely helpful in explaining it, and it definitely was very in-depth, and it like explained exactly what was going on. It was a helpful resource for the person going through it and for the parents or family of someone going through OCD.
Yeah, the book, folks, the book Talking Back to OCD, I think it's called. They actually have like, you're meant to read it together as a family, and there's chapters for kids or the person going through therapy, as well as the loved one or the family member learning about it. So it's interesting. So it's like a two-part course where you can both read the book together or read it separately, but you're both working through it. It's meant to kind of help both loved ones and the person with OCD. So thank you so much, Jake, for sticking with us and jumping from Facebook to Instagram. I really appreciate it. We will see you in a few weeks in DC.
All right.
And folks, if you still want to ask questions on a replay of this broadcast, feel free. We'll be answering it, and I'll also be popping this up on Facebook, so you'll be able to see the broadcast there. If you want to see Unstuck, it is now available on OCDkidsmovie.com on our family page. You can stream it directly from our website. We're also streaming on Vimeo on demand, and we have some streaming options in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Greek. So if you want to watch subtitles, the film in those languages, feel free. Anyway, we'll see you in a few weeks in Washington, D.C. at the OCD conference. I'm Chris Bear, and thanks for joining Kids Speak Out here on Instagram.